In 1983, Nigeria expelled over 2 million undocumented migrants from its borders, nearly half of them from Ghana. The expulsion spawned the phrase, "Ghana must go," in reference to the big checked bags into which exiting migrants packed the last of their belongings. But go back to 1969, and the expulsion was the other way around. Millions of Nigerians forcefully expelled from Ghana. It was Nigerians must go, the largely untold story of how Ghana expelled Nigerians. It was a crisis that unfolded amidst political tensions, economic struggles, and social upheaval. First off, some history lesson. Various factors combined to make Ghana one of the preferred destinations for migrants in West Africa. It started from the beginning of the 19th century to the 1960s. Ghana was the top producer of cocoa. The migrants came mostly from Togo, Burkina Faso, and Nigeria. As far back as the early 20th century, Nigerians had been well established in Ghana and had contributed to the socio-economic development of Ghana before and after independence. As at 1931, Nigerians made the largest single group of immigrant residents in Ghana. They traded, they farmed cocoa, provided farm labor, worked as farm contractors, worked in factories, and did menial work on construction sites. They were successful. Their success attracted a further influx of more Nigerians into Ghana between 1931 and 1960. The population of Nigerians in Ghana increased from 57,400 in 1931 to 191,802 in 1963. The swelling population was a problem waiting to blow up. From the mid-1960s, the overwhelming population of migrant residents in Ghana was becoming a matter of concern for the indigenous Ghanaian population. The population pressured the government to have native peoples participate in the economic life of their country. It was a clamor for indigenization. The clamor heightened towards the end of 1969. Migrants would take the fall for the large-scale unemployment that would befall Ghana. Called aliens, and mostly Nigerians, they were accused of posing a threat to the economic survival of Ghana. Successive governments, both colonial and Ghanaian, all introduced immigration measures to control the influx of immigrants into the country. What they could not do was to strictly enforce the regulations. The intervention policies were to control the number of immigrant population and restrict the exercise of certain activities by non-nationals. One of such policies was the Aliens Compliance Order of 18 November 1969. Though the order affected some migrants from the other Western African countries, such as Togo, Burkina Faso, and Ivory Coast, a majority of the victims were Yorubas from the southwestern Nigeria, numbering about 140,000 out of an estimated 191 Nigerian immigrants stuck in Ghana then. Ghanaians hailed the expulsion order. They called it a patriotic move to garner jobs for Ghanaians and rid the country of crimes. The agitation to deport aliens or strangers, as the foreign migrants were called by Ghanaians natives, started around the mid-20th century. Recall the cocoa hold-up in 1932. Nigerian cocoa farmers in Abuja exposed the local cocoa hold-up, led by the king of the town against the European firms. 2 years later, in 1935, that action instigated a far-reaching resolution of the town at a meeting of Okinyaman in 1935. The Traditional Council urged the colonial government to ensure the migrants referred to as troublemakers were kept out of Akinjem Abuja. The resolution read that people from Nigeria and other places should be made amenable to the customary laws of the states in which they reside, and that any act of insubordination should be punished by deportation. So, come 1969, that was what the government of then Prime Minister Kofi Busia was poised to do. He invoked the Aliens Compliance Order to deport an estimated 2.5 million undocumented African migrants, majority of them Nigerians. The Nigerians had grown unknowingly enterprising, their business acumen sharper, to the detriment of the Ghanaians' businesses. Even in Ghana's instability, Nigerian traders managed to have everything, and at cheaper prices. The resulting fear shook the Nigerians affected. Most had intermarried and traced their roots back to trade relationships between the two regions, even before colonial rule. The expulsion was sudden. Nigerians who had lived in Ghana for years were left with little time to pack. Families, businesses, and livelihoods were disrupted overnight. The crisis didn't only affect individuals. Entire communities were uprooted. Some faced hostility from locals, while others found themselves stranded with no means of return. Ghana's government claimed the decision was necessary for national security and economic recovery, but many Ghanaians questioned the morality and consequences of such a harsh policy. The expulsion sparked international outrage, with human rights organizations calling it an act of discrimination. However, Ghana's economy showed signs of improvement following the mass deportations. Years later, Nigeria itself would experience a similar wave of migration crisis. In 1958, Nigeria struck oil as a young, soon-to-be liberated country with a population of 100 million. International oil companies, Shell, then Mobil and Ajib, set up shop in the country to drill oil commercially. The oil money was steady and hopes were high that Nigeria could prosper, despite the brutal military regimes that marred that period. In the 1970s, the economy exploded when oil prices soared worldwide. The golden decade had arrived, and the country became Africa's wealthiest, securing its title Giant of Africa by 1974. Nigeria's oil wells were spitting out some 2.3 million barrels a day. The standard of living improved. There was an influx of people from the farms into the cities. When they traveled, robust iron boxes were generally preferred over cheap plastic sacks. The influx came not just from within Nigeria, but from across the region. While Nigeria boomed, Ghana was the opposite. A mix of famine and insurgency had been brought on by a crash in the price of cocoa and the 1966 coup, which ousted independence leader Kwame Nkrumah. At the time, the country's population hovered around 7 million mark, but several million people decided to join East and try their fortune in the prosperous Nigeria. Recruiters from Nigeria went to Ghana, looking for people who would like to teach or take up casual jobs, the jobs Nigerians themselves were unwilling to do. So many Ghanaians went to Nigeria that it seemed like every Ghanaian family had a relative working there. Nigeria had 19 states back then, and their primary and secondary schools were filled with Ghanaian teachers. And then came the oil crash. Global oil prices started to dip in 1982, when large consumer markets such as the United States and Canada slipped into recession and demand was low. By 1983, the price of a barrel had fallen to $29, down from $37 in 1980. At around the same time, the US began producing its own oil, further cutting demand and causing excess supply. Nigeria's economy, almost exclusively reliant on oil, was hard hit. By 1982, 90% of the country's foreign reserves had been wiped out, the Washington Post reported. Food prices skyrocketed and salaries became erratic. Poor policy decisions at the highest level of government only made things worse. Ghana's nightmare was being replayed in Nigeria. As it began to feel the crunch, Nigeria started to turn inwards. By 1982, the word aliens crept into political manifestos as politicians prepared for the 1983 general elections. Politicians laid the blame for the failing economy at the feet of African migrants, especially Ghanaians. They said Ghanaians had taken all the jobs and brought crime to Nigeria, and if elected, they would chase them out, they promised. This animosity began to spill over into relations between Nigerians and Ghanaians. Stories emerged of Ghanaians being physically harassed, Nigerians justified the expulsion by citing economic instability, increasing unemployment, and the need for resource control. But this didn't come without its own set of challenges. Many African nationals, particularly from neighboring countries, faced similar hardships as the Nigerians had in Ghana. From Nigerians leaving Ghana in 1969 to Ghanaians leaving Nigeria in 1983, expulsions are not new. Nigerians born after 1983 have little knowledge of the expulsions on both sides and the hardship they created. What they know comes from stories shared within families down generation lines. The Ghana Must Go version is more prominent, captured in the name associated with those big check bags. Younger people just know and mount the name, without conscious thoughts to how it came about. Even then, the 1983 Ghana Must Go version is more prominent than the Nigeria Must Go of 1969. There is comparably little material available on the Nigeria Must Go story. Young Nigerians and Ghanaians take to social media in rivalry to debate which national teams play better, which country has better cuisine, who makes the better jollof, how Nollywood compares against Gallywood, and which country's actors are better looking. But the two expulsions mentioned highlighted deeper issues: migration, resource competition, and national security. They serve as reminders of the fine balance between national interests and human rights. As the world grapples with migration, both Ghana and Nigeria have learned tough lessons in policy making. The fallout, however, created a framework for better migration regulation in the future. Today, both nations have worked to restore relations, though scars from the past remain. From economic trade partnerships to cultural exchanges, both Nigeria and Ghana now seek to move beyond past mistakes. In recent years, Nigeria and Ghana have seen growth in diplomatic, cultural, and trade relations. These collaborations prove that lessons learned from past mistakes are indeed valuable. Nigeria and Ghana now share a future of greater collaboration. Regional projects, education exchanges, and business ventures are creating stronger ties between both nations. Young Nigerians and Ghanaians are working side by side in business, music, and education. Nollywood and Gallywood collaborate on projects. Actors from the sides bridge the lines between both countries. This is a testament to how far both countries have come from the troubled past of expulsions. The expulsion cries were a dark chapter in the histories of both Nigeria and Ghana. But as both nations evolve, they are learning the importance of diplomacy, understanding, and cooperation. In the face of challenges, we are reminded that unity is more powerful than division. The future of Nigeria and Ghana rests not in their past conflicts, but in their shared desire for peace and prosperity. And it is this desire that will shape the future of West Africa.